That's the interesting aspect of you said it. It's how do you communicate your culture to somebody who's actually never been in your office,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or
Right.
and that's a tricky one. So I'm going to throw it right back at you. I mean, we
Yeah.
do struggle with this, but what is your take on that when you have somebody who is joining Oddworld as a contractor or even a full-time employee who doesn't live in San Luis Obispo?
Well, we're in Emeryville
Oh,
now.
yeah, Emeryville.
So we've
Sorry.
been in, yeah, that's all good. All good.
Okay.
Which made it a little easier than San Luis Obispo.
Okay.
But except all those big tech companies I'm talking about, they're in commute distance from here. So
Yeah.
the other impacts. I don't. I
Like, what are the things you say about your culture? I mean, do you, and in fact, for just in general, how would you describe your culture?
it's a culture in some regards of we try to keep it of generalists.
Okay.
And this is interesting. Like at times, remember when we shut down the operation in San Luis Obispo, there was some amazing talents at that studio. And I remember I was talking to someone at DreamWorks who was looking for some CG people. I was like, this guy, you just really, I mean, there was a lot of people like that. And then there's a couple of people you're like, you give it to them, it's going to be solved, just real efficient performers and talents. And they'd say, no, we didn't. I was like, how could you not hire that guy? Like, I worked in the film business. How could you not hire that guy? And they said, well, he's too much of a generalist. We want very specific people focused on, what do you do? Are you a compositor? Or are you a blue screen remover, right? Like green screen remover. And you're like, that's a difference now? Like that's different specialities, So there's sort of this hyper fragmentation that takes place. And the more that you have hyper fragmented talents, the more that your distributed development model will probably break down. So you need people that have to be willing, if they have that sort of union hat mentality of, it's not my job, man. You told me to do this. This is what I did. It delivered down a pipe. Someone else was supposed to communicate that well. Sorry they didn't, but it's not my fault. And you're like, but you could have caught it, like you could have caught it. So we call that throwing over the fence. If they're just throwing the meat over the fence and going like, well, this is what you ordered. It was like, kinda, but it has to work. So there's a challenge there. A culture of generalists that's trying to own the project individually, right? Like we at times let me say one of the benefits. One of the benefits of the contracting is that you have real contract, and people have to be adults, right? Like this is what you're signing on for. This is what you're going to do. This is more like house contracting rather than game production, right? If it was internally. If the plumber can't do what he said he's doing, he's out. He's out because he misrepresented it, and we just get to say it's not working, right? And they can say the same thing. Look, this is not what I signed up for. I'm out. They can say the same thing. So you really have to have a very transparent and honest, and that's a strange thing, a strange word in business, I think, honest. I hear all these CEOs talk about it all the time. They're full of fucking shit, right? They're just completely full of shit, right? And
do you feel strongly about that?
Yeah, I listen to all this bullshit about how, we're doing this and we're doing that. It's like, who are you kidding? You're robbing everyone blind. That's what you guys, what happened in your boardroom, that's probably the only really honest thing that happened, and it won't be in the minutes, right? But, so, I'm always a punk about that stuff. But when you, so as a culture, you have to be transparent. You have to be honest, because if you're not, it can sink you faster than if you weren't within your own building, right? And what happens. Like, anyone who's been anywhere for a while knows that sometimes you have dishonest personalities, and sometimes they're able to climb the ladder and a bureaucracy. Other things can happen, and other people just hang on. But in the distributed development environment, if you're not honest and transparent, it can really blow up in your face, and you don't know it. You won't know it, because a lot of people will just take the check, and I'm not saying I'm I'm immune to that problem myself if I were on the other end of the spectrum. So we have to be honest, because you don't want to have surprises because they're going to happen anyway. And so you'd say, like, if we have people that are committed to delivering high quality product and being proud of the work they do, not just in the confines that they were holding, but we want people saying, I saw this last night and I think it plays like shit, right? And there'll be a different group from a different part of the company. It's like, field it, be polite, but field it. We want your honest opinion. We don't want yes men, right? We don't need a total compliance except for pipeline processes and procedures and human courtesy, right? Like be professional. Don't be a jerk, and communicate well. And sometimes, like let's say if it was California labor law, you could have someone that really misrepresented their talent ability and isn't cutting it at all. But there's a process that you're going to go through of having to retain that talent, just due to the way California operates, that is really going to handicap your production. And because they might have completely misrepresented themselves, too bad once you hired them, right? You're going to have to go through these formalities. And, anyone who runs a business in California knows what I'm talking about. But so with the contract, if they can't commit to what they did, you can just go, look, it's not working. We need this. So in some cases, the more precise it is, like if you say, we need this codec to work, or we need this compression to be better, or and you have very isolated, containable problems, that's easier because it's a very finite definition, right? I think the place where it gets really hard is more in art and design, particularly design as you're being creative, because it's such a touchy-feely thing. And then you go, really, you want game designers working with engineers very closely. You want, like what we used to do at Oddworld, was we forcing them to sort of intermingle in the desks, like artists would be on this side, in the same sort of row areas of cubicles, and then the engineers would be on the other. Previously, they had been in separate groups. So we're like, no, the ones working together, they need that high frequency. And then you find out, well, some are in North America, the engineers are in Australia. Now you're completely separated. And if they're not willing to, be up at that late night, then you're playing the phone game. You're passing the telephone message. Or no one is. So you just have to suck it up. But I think to be in a creative project, it's really risky. And the higher a quality you shoot, the more risk you incur. Like, this cost us a lot more than I ever thought it was going to cost us. And I think with success, like if you have nurtured talent and relationships like you have, then you can let's call it franchise your production pipeline more effectively, because all that's coming. So back to your original question, if I say what's the culture, it's the dedication to the end quality of the product. Because if you don't have that, and you're more concerned with other aspects that aren't related to the quality of the product, like, is this really, without getting into a fuzzy dissection on what those things might be, but it's a world full of individual people, and everyone's got their issues, right?
Yeah.
But that's one of the things we filter out. Like, you need to know, we're in this for the win. We're not in this for the joyride. We're in it for the win. This is where we think we are. This is what we think we have to do. This is what we're targeting as a goal. I used to, before I got into management, I used to, as an artist, you're like, I don't like that word management. I don't really like that word team leadership. I mean, you actually you come out of art school and you're kind of very opposed to those ideas, right? So it's you get used to it. The more I've been in leadership, I'm like, wow, this is the skill I needed so much more, management. And this has been really humbling, because old techniques I would use in management that sometimes would be, I wouldn't say the techniques, but just expressions of frustration at different times. You'd be like, come on, man, how long have we been working on this? This is the best we can get on this. Like, what are we missing? Who do we bring in to help? It's really hard to make that work in distributed development. It can be fine on the floor, and they go, everyone says their piece, and you separate out, and you find out from someone else, hey, so-and-so is really upset, man. They're off the reservation for a while. What happened? You yelled at them. I go, I didn't yell at anyone. Well, you said something like it's taking too long. I said, I did say it's taking too long. Well, they interpreted that as you yelled at them. Those things just become that much more difficult. So I think you need super stable, non-emotional, almost a clinical degree of management that you humanize as much as possible. But on the back end, deliveries, expectation, behavior, and communication have to be at a certain standard, or else it's just not going to work at all. And so I think the more that you have a company that is, we are in that fuzzy space, like you said, doing things that haven't been done before. And if it has been done before, quite frankly, no one's really that interested. Right? Right? They just don't care. It's like, I want that game that's going to show off the new features of that new box that I just paid $400 for, or whatever, $300 for.